Throughout history, there have been many war crimes committed throughout various different conflicts. The Second World War saw scores of massacres, execution, and killings of innocent people, and many historians debate when the conflict actually began. Some consider it to have started earlier than the Nazi invasion of Poland, as the Japanese army was seeking to conquer large amounts of territory in Asia, and in particular in China. The Japanese became infamous for their war crimes and horrific killing and treatment of people throughout the Second World War, and two men even held a contest as to see who was the first to kill 100 people with a sword. But in one Chinese city, the Japanese committed horrendous war crimes as they took control of the city, and the massacre of Nanking was one of the worst war crimes of the Second World War. Join us today as we look at this, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. In August 1937, the Japanese army invaded and tried to take Shanghai, but during the battle they faced heavy urban hand-to-hand fighting, and also suffered very heavy losses and casualties. Initially the decision was taken not to expand the war because of the casualty rate in the Japanese army. Then this order was given to capture Nanking, the then capital of the Republic of China. After the Chinese lost Shanghai, it was likely that Nanking would fall, and to preserve the Chinese army, most of it was withdrawn. It was planned for the Chinese to fight a war of attrition, and it was announced that the city would fight to the death and never surrender. The Chinese government left for relocation, as did the president, and Nanking was left in the hands of an international committee led by German John Raab. He asked the Japanese military leaders for a ceasefire so that the Chinese could leave the city. This ceasefire was rejected, and this then left the city to fall to the Japanese. Some Chinese soldiers were in hiding inside of a safety zone, and these then became a target for the Japanese. The massacres and war crimes associated with the city of Nanking are believed to have happened over 6 weeks in December 1937, but they occurred after and before this too. As the Japanese army advanced towards Nanking, they conducted horrific crimes. On the march to the city they beheaded, executed, assaulted, and stole from many settlements and people. One of the most horrific stories to emerge on the march towards the city was the story of 2 Japanese officers who had a race as to see who could kill 100 people using a sword the first. The Japanese media reported on this contest as if it was a sporting event like a football match, with the score reported over a number of days, but the 2 men involved were going through settlements executing civilians in barbaric ways. They were not facing the enemies in hand-to-hand combat, but massacring defenceless people. Around the city many buildings and houses were set on fire, and military barracks, homes, which cost the city in today's money around $100 million, were burned to the ground. The Westerners living in the city fled, and only 27 foreigners remained, 5 who were journalists stayed. Prince Asaka, the uncle of Emperor Hirohito, was assigned to Nanking, and it's alleged that he issued an order to kill all captives, and with this sanctioned the massacre of the people in the city. During the Battle of Nanking, the Japanese forces arrived at the gates on the 9th of December, and 2 days later dropped leaflets in the city, urging the city to surrender in 24 hours, and if not, there would be no mercy. The Japanese waited for an answer for the surrendering, but nothing was received, and with this, General Iwani Matsui issued the army to take Nanking by force. The Japanese assaulted the walls of the city from different directions, and the city was battered by heavy artillery fire and attacks from the air. Some Chinese soldiers tried to blend in with civilians, but some were shot as they tried to flee. The 6th and 116th Divisions of the Japanese army entered the city first on the 13th of December, then they went straight after the retreating Chinese units. The final phase of the battle was the slaughter of Chinese soldiers. They executed around 4,000 Chinese soldiers, disguised in plain clothes, as civilians during this time. But from the moments they entered the city, the assault on Nanking quickly turned into a horrific scene of war crimes. Assaults of women, murder, arson, looting and other atrocities were committed. Around 20,000 women were assaulted during the occupation, and the Japanese soldiers went door to door looking for girls, and many were immediately killed after their horrific ordeal. A reverend later wrote, "I know not where to end. Never I have heard or read such brutality. We estimate at least 1,000 cases a night, and many by day. In case of resistance or anything that seemed like disapproval, there is a bayonet stab or a bullet. People are hysterical. Women are being carried off every morning, afternoon and evening. The whole Japanese army seems to be free to go and come as it pleases and do whatever it pleases. Some conservative estimates place the number of people slaughtered by the Japanese around 100,000, but the general consensus is that 200,000 people were killed in the massacre. A surgeon, Robert O. Wilson, wrote to his family documenting the atrocities, saying, "The slaughter of civilians is appalling. I could go on for pages telling the cases of assault and brutality almost beyond belief. 2 bayoneted corpses are the only survivors of 7 street cleaners who were sitting in their headquarters when Japanese soldiers came in without warning or reason and killed 5 of their number and wounded the 2 that found their way to the hospital. Let me recount some instances occurring in the last 2 days. Last night the house of one of the Chinese staff members of the university was broken into. In the university middle school, where there were 8,000 people, the Japanese came in 10 times last night, over the wall, stole food, clothing, and assaulted until they were satisfied. They bayoneted one little boy of 8, who had 5 bayonet wounds, including one that was through his stomach. The killing continued and thousands of innocent people were killed. The death toll on civilians is difficult to work out, as many bodies were burned and buried in mass graves and also dumped in the Yangtze River. Hospitals came overflowing with patients and could not keep up. It was said, 'We come across corpses every 100 to 200 yards. The bodies of civilians that I examined had bullet holes in their backs. These people had presumably been fleeing and were shot from behind. The Japanese marched through the city in groups of 10 and 20 soldiers and loot the shops. I watched with my own eyes as they looted the cafe of our German baker, Herr Kiesling. Hempel's hotel was broken into as well, as was almost every shop on Chungshan and Taiping Road. It was also said with regards to looting that, in the first days of the occupation, the soldiers took a great deal of bedding, cooking utensils and food from refugees. Practically every building in the city was entered many times by these roving gangs of soldiers throughout the first 6 or 7 weeks of the occupation. There was no burning until the Japanese troops had been in the city 5 or 6 days. Beginning, I believe, on the 19th or 20th of December, burning was carried on regularly for 6 weeks. 1/3 of the city was destroyed by arson, and newly built government buildings were also destroyed. Soldiers stole from the rich and the poor. The Japanese also soon after the city fell, went after the Chinese looking for more soldiers, and also executed thousands of young Chinese men. Lots were taken to the banks of the Yangtze River, forced to walk in, and then were machine-gunned to death. The Strawstring Gorge massacre occurred on the banks of the river on the 18th of December. Japanese soldiers had tied the hands of POWs and then divided them into 4 columns, and they then opened fire. The majority of the bodies were then thrown into the river. They also massacred 1,300 Chinese soldiers and civilians at the Taiping Gate, and many were blown up with landmines and then set on fire with petrol before being finished off with bayonets. The corpses around the city were regularly piled 6 feet high, and the sounds of machine gun fire was heard all over. The streets and the alleys were filled with the dead, and there were also accounts of cannibalism. The Japanese did not also respect the safety zones set up, and there were a number of cases of Japanese soldiers committing further atrocities in that area. The cause of the Nanking massacre was not clear, and it was said, there is no obvious explanation for this grim event. The Japanese soldiers who had expected quick victory instead had been fighting hard for months, and had taken casualties higher than anticipated. They were bored, angry, frustrated and tired. The Chinese women were undefended, their menfolk powerless or absent. Perhaps all Chinese seemed marked out as victims. When General Matsui later heard of the atrocities inside the city, it was claimed that he was shocked by this. He allegedly told one of his assistants, "Now realise that we have unknowingly wrought a most grievous effect on the city. When I think of the feelings and sentiments of many of my Chinese friends who have fled from Nanking, and of the future of these 2 countries, I cannot but feel depressed. I am very lonely and can never get in a mood to rejoice about this victory. I personally feel sorry for the tragedies of the people, but the army must continue until China repents. Now in the winter the season gives me time to reflect. I offer my sympathy with deep emotion to 1,000,000 innocent people." As mentioned, it's believed that the Nanking massacre and the atrocities committed caused the deaths of 200,000 people. After the surrender of Japan, the military officers in charge of the soldiers at Nanking were placed on trial. Prince Asaka was granted immunity as a member of the imperial royal family, and a huge amount of evidence was heard regarding the crimes of the city. General Matsui was convicted of his war crimes and it was said he did nothing to stop the horrors, and that organised and wholesale murder of male civilians was conducted with the apparent sanction of the commanders on the pretext that Chinese soldiers had removed their uniforms and were mingling with the population. Groups of Chinese civilians were formed, bound with their hands behind their backs, and marched outside the walls of the city, where they were killed in groups by machine gun fire and with bayonets. Along with 6 other Class A war criminals, Matsui was sentenced to death, and 18 others were given prison sentences. Matsui was executed by hanging at Sugamo Prison at the age of 70. Hisano Tani was taken to the south gate of Nanking, and then executed by a firing squad. But these reprisals did little for the people who witnessed or suffered because of the horror of Nanking. Today it's considered one of the most evil and worst war crimes of the Second World War and of history. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.